Excellencies, we have our work cut out for us. Human rights are the oxygen of humanity, but one by one, human rights are being suffocated by autocrats, crushing opposition because they fear what a truly empowered people would do, by a patriarchy that keeps girls out of school and women at arm's length from basic rights, by wars and violence that strip populations of their right to food, water, and education, by warmongers who thumb their nose at international law, international humanitarian law, and UN Charter. Human rights are, in fact, a source of solutions. And the Pact provides a playbook on how we can win the fight for human rights on several fronts. First, human rights through peace and peace through human rights. Conflicts inflict human rights violations on a massive scale. In the occupied Palestinian territory, violations of human rights have skyrocketed since the horrific Hamas attacks of October 7 and the intolerable levels of death and destruction in Gaza. And I'm gravely concerned by the rising violence in the occupied West Bank by Israel's settlers and other violations, as well as calls for annexation. We are witnessing a precarious ceasefire. We must avoid at all costs a resumption of hostilities. The people in Gaza have already suffered too much. It's time for a permanent ceasefire, the dignified release of all remaining hostages, irreversible progress towards a two-state solution, an end to the occupation, and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Gaza as an integral part. In Sudan, bloodshed, displacement and famine are engulfing the country. The warring parties must take immediate action to protect civilians, uphold human rights, cease hostilities, and forge peace. And domestic and international human rights monitoring and investigation mechanisms should be permitted to document what's happening on the ground. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we see a deadly whirlwind of violence and horrifying human rights abuses, amplified by the recent M23 offensive supported by the Rwandan Defense Forces. As more cities fall, the risk of a regional war rises. It's time to silence the guns. It's time for diplomacy and dialogue. The recent joint summit in Tanzania offered a way forward with a renewed call for an immediate ceasefire. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected. The Congolese people deserve peace. We need greater cooperation to bring an end to the hostilities and forge a path towards an inclusive democratic transition and the return to civilian rule, allowing for the safe return of the Rohingya refugees. And in Haiti, we are seeing massive human rights violations, including more than 1 million people displaced and children facing a horrific increase in sexual violence and recruitment into gangs. In the coming days, I will put forward proposals to the United Nations Security Council for greater stability and security for the people of Haiti, namely through an effective UN assistance mechanism to support the multilateral security support mission, the national police, and Haitian authorities. A durable solution requires a political process led and done by the Haitian people that restores democratic institutions through elections. The Pact for the Future calls for peace processes and approaches rooted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, international law, and UN Charter. It proposes specific actions to prioritize conflict prevention, mediation, resolution, and peace building, and includes a commitment to tackle the root causes of conflict, which so often enmeshed in denials of basic human needs and rights.